So Mörner says that of these Pacific islands, he says, look, he said, I've done the most detailed study of sea level rise in the Pacific Islands that's been done anywhere. In 2000, I was appointed chairman of the International Commission of Inquiry into Sea Level in the Maldives. And I ran that for 4 years and have kept in touch and carried on the research ever since they changed the chairmanship. And he said there has been no sea level rise in the Maldives for 1,250 years. So it's gone up and down, and now it's about the same as it was 1,250 years ago. There's been no change for 50 years. How do I know, he said? Because there was a tree growing by the shore, and that tree was 40 years old, and it would have been swamped if there had been any sea level rise, and yet it was still there. So he said one day he went and saw this tree, which he had previously recorded 40 years previously. There it was, but it was on its side. Still in leaf, but on its side, which had been torn up by its roots. So he went to the locals and he said, this tree, I saw it when it was a shoot 40 years ago. Now here it is, all this size. And has the sea come up and washed it away? Oh no, they said. A group of Australian environmentalists passed by this way. They saw the tree, realised that this showed there'd been no sea level rise here for 40 years, and uprooted it so nobody else would see that. And so he put that story also in his paper. Now, as for the sea level, as for the Pacific Islands, they are made of coral. Now, what does coral do as the sea rises above it? Does anybody know?
Right.
It grows to meet the light. Thank you very much. Exactly. The one place on Earth you don't have to worry about sea level rise is a coral atoll. It is, after all, not a mere coincidence that as the sea level has risen by 130 metres over the last 11,400 years since the last ice age, as the vast ice masses that covered the whole of America and Europe melted and went into the sea, and up came the sea level, and also it warmed up, and so there was thermospheric expansion as well. 130 metres of sea level rise in 11,400 years, and by some amazing coincidence, all the coral atolls are exactly at or a little above sea level. Of course it's not a coincidence, it's because they've grown to meet the light. And a recent paper has actually measured their extent as it was 30 years ago and as it is now, and sure enough, those that appear to have suffered little sea level rise have simply grown to meet it, and so the land area of all of these atolls, except one, is doing just fine and is about the same as it was. And that one, does anybody know? The Carteret Islands, and that's because the coral atoll formed on the caldera of an extinct volcano. Now, as you know, the problem with a caldera is that that is a collapsed cauldron of the volcano. And that volcano is continuing to collapse, so that the atoll above it is gradually sinking beneath the waves at a rate which is so rapid that the coral can't grow fast enough to keep up with it. And also, the locals there have been dynamiting the reefs to get at the fish, and that, I can assure you, doesn't help much either. And the only other island that I can find that has actually disappeared altogether beneath the waves is an island that once had 10,000 people on it. It is the island of Lobnachara in the mouth of the Hooghly River in India. And that happened because of the tectonic subduction of the Indian plate moving northward under the Himalayan plate, and therefore the whole of the land was pushed downwards by that subduction by just enough feet to swamp the whole island, and so those 10,000 people did have to be relocated some years ago. But even the usual suspects don't pretend that that was anything to do with global warming. And indeed, in my lifetime, as the Himalayan plate rises up with the thrust from underneath of the Indian plate moving northward underneath it, the summit of Everest, which was measured originally by the surveyors at exactly 29,000 feet. And they thought nobody would believe that, so they added 2 feet to make it look like a real reading. It's now 29,031 feet, as the whole of the Himalayan chain is being thrust upwards. So these tectonic movements, plus isostatic recovery, where the land is bouncing upwards because the ice from the ice age is no longer crushing down upon it, make the measurement of sea level rise by tide gauges, as it used to be done, more or less impossible, because the tide gauges themselves are moving up and down all over the place. which is why it's now done by satellite altimetry against a reference geoid, which is an idealized shape of the Earth at mean sea level. And then they can measure by bouncing lasers and radars off from the satellites and measuring how long it takes for the signal to get back to the satellite, exactly how the sea level has changed. So potentially, that plus the gravitational anomaly satellites, which can also measure very small changes in sea level, these two appear to be showing, if you put them together, that there is no sea level rise at all going along at the moment, exactly as Mörner's corrected slide shows. So, and he says this, which I think is the point I'll end the sea level point on, that once you take the sea level rise scare out of the equation, there's really not much else to worry about, even if the planet does get a few degrees warmer this century, which in any case, it won't. Thank you, sir.